Hey everybody, great to see you here at the Red Barn as we keep working on this thing. And for those of you that may not know, if you're joining us for the first time, this thing is a 1972 Porsche 914 that we are putting a Ferrari 360 engine and 6-speed manual transmission, gated 6-speed manual transmission into. So lots of fun stuff going on here. In this episode, I do only a few things because I had something that got me completely off track, and that was I attended the 000 magazine's Turbo 50 celebration of 50 years of the Porsche Turbo here in the North Bay area at Summit Skywalker Ranch in Marin County. And so I'm going to put a bunch of stuff about that at the end. If you're interested in seeing that, let me just tell you, check it out. It was pretty spectacular, and I will say, if you ever have a chance to attend a 000 event, don't miss it. They are something special. So, hope you enjoy that. But in the meantime, let's get back to this build and see how far we can get. Okay, unboxing time from round 2 of the Send Cut Send stuff. Whoop! Stickers. And a packing slip. And some supporting information. And the coil mounts. Now, slightly different packaging than last time because I just decided to get one design done for each side. And the odd pieces, I'm just going to hand clearance because I think it's just going to be simpler. I can probably get a better fit than trying to exactly worry about where the dimension of that cutout was, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and fit these and see how I did. Well, wonders never cease. Maybe you noticed when I was pulling these out of the package that I was doing a comparison because it wasn't obvious to me which side was which, whereas last time it was really obvious. And I don't know if you can tell, completely without doing it on purpose this way, I designed these things. There aren't two different designs. There's one design. And let me prove it. So if I pop out a plug, or excuse me, a coil, and I put this one on this side, you can see, right? It's a much smaller, as I mentioned, it's a much narrower piece, right? And so there it is here. I'm going to take that same piece. We're going to walk around to this side. And it never even occurred to me to try this in CAD, just flip them over. But if I then just turn this thing upside down, there it is on that side. And so, yeah, you can see I could have made 8 exactly the same. But I almost did. So, this is that whole live and learn thing I mentioned. I just assumed, I didn't check. I shouldn't say I didn't assume anything. I just decided to measure up and build one shape for each side. And it turns out I could have just done 8 the same way and probably got them for, I don't know, a whole bunch less money. Not that these were expensive, but so there we go. We got the new coils, or excuse me, the new coil mounts, and you can see this is 0.187 instead of the 0.25 that the other ones were, and so it just barely. It's a much better fit. And like I said, they're so much narrower this way. Let me grab an old one and I'll show you the comparo. And you can see these were completely different based on, where I wanted the coils to point. So maybe that was part of my problem. So let's see, which side would this one be? Would this be this side? It really doesn't matter. But if I pull this one out, you can see, right? Much, much, much bulkier. Much, much less bulky. And it just looks way more elegant. It's going to disappear a little bit more. Now it's a question of, do I leave them silver? Do I do them in black? I'm going back and forth on whether I do the valve covers in wrinkled silver like this again, or if I go red here and red up top on the plenum. I don't know, that might be too much red, but we'll see. But anyway, so coil mounts, the saga. But it looks like we're all done now, and happy. Okay, one last thing on these coil mounts. So check this out. You might remember the clearances I had to do. This is really going to be hard to see, but you see that I'm holding two of these together. Well, not anymore, I'm not. There's just the teeniest little bit of clearance. You can just barely see the black. I just sort of like marked this underneath one so you could potentially see how very little I had to take off. You can see I had to go after the edge of this one. So now I have a specific position on this one, but now that that's done, you can see it sits right over that clearance area and has a much nicer overall fit than that other one did. So that side is that side. And then even better, if I bring you around here, this side fits on with no clearancing needed at all. So it's literally just fine how it is. So that's it for the coil mounts. And we're on to the next thing. Okay, time for some wiring. And when I say wiring, I mean wiring. Look at the size of this. This is the #1 cable, #1 AWG, American Wire Gauge, size cable. This happens to be the ground cable. But this is what connects from the battery to the Haltech Nexus R5 ECU. And you might be thinking, what in the world are you doing connecting a 1-gauge battery cable directly to your ECU? Well, the idea here is it's not just an ECU. As you may know from watching earlier episodes, it's actually also got a built-in power management unit. So it's got 4 25-amp circuits capable of things like the fans, the water pump, fuel pump, etc. So it's not just sending triggers to a relay system. It actually can power it directly. And because of that, it needs the big cable. And they also ship that unit, Haltech ships that unit with these Radlock connectors. And as you know from an earlier episode, if you watched them, this is a push button release that goes onto a post that's on the ECU, and it rotates, it can rotate, so there's no strain. Great stuff. Anyway, time to get this crimped on here. And so I've stripped back the appropriate amount of sheathing, and I'm now going to carefully make sure I get every single strand of this big ass wire into that lug. And I did. So there's that. Now, what I've got sitting here in this little plastic case was, here I was all fired up and ready to go, and I was just going to use my Harbor Freight hydraulic crimper until I realized that it only goes to 0 in terms of wire size. So this isn't big enough. But as I'm famous for sometimes saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. So I contacted my good buddy, who is the owner of the Secret Undisclosed shop. And what I would say is, let's quote Crocodile Dundee, that's not a crimper, this is a crimper. And this is, this thing is some serious kit right here. But the short version of what this does is it's got these rotatable jaws that if you push this down, you can see has a whole bunch of different sized lug, 6-sided lug crimping capabilities. So I figured out which one was the right size, and it's that one right there. So I am now going to crimp this thing. I'm going to do it in 2 separate places because this is a pretty narrow jaw, so I can get 2 separate crimps on here. So let me bring you around here and show you what I'm up to. I'm going to make this so I can see it and not move it too far out of the way. I'm going to try to get this right down at the front of that lug. Make sure that the fitting is staying in position on the wire. And that is the first crimp. And you can see what that does is it does a nice even crimp. And now I'm going to come down to the second part and do it again on the lower portion of the lug. There's that one. All right, and with the crimp done, this seal slides up over that section of the wire, and then this back shell, I call it, comes up and threads on to the back of the Radlock. And that is, as I understand it, a waterproof connection on one end and ready to go on to the ECU. So one down, 3 more ends to go. And here's a couple necessary boring things relative to the electronics. This is the factory Ferrari oil gauge sender that lives right here. And so what I had to do is get an adapter, and this is a Bosch Motorsport pressure and temperature sensor. I'm not going to use that as the temperature sensor because that's not where they want you to run the temperature, but by the time you do the math on some of this stuff, you get in these, you know, fancier sending units. Is not a horrible thing. And by the way, I probably will hook that up to something from a temperature perspective just to see if maybe it's the same, because I have 2 temperature sensors now. I got that one, and then the factory one, of all places, is right here. And that again has been replaced with something that I know I can get the calibration for. That happens to be another part from Haltech. It's just a regular coolant temperature sensor that works for this application. Again, a small adapter required to get it from the Ferrari size to the more common sensor size. So I've got sensors in place for pretty much everything. What else do I need? Oh, coolant temperature sensor goes, where does it go? Why am I drawing a blank? Oh, it goes right here, and that's a standard sensor thread setup. So it takes, in fact, that's the exact same sensor that gets used as the oil sensor that you just saw. So I'm replacing that with all new stuff. But I'm now getting ready to dive in on building the wiring harness. And yes, I'm hesitating a little bit because, well, you'll see when I start taking you through the ECU setup, which is not as intimidating as I thought, but it is, it's a lot of wires, I'll tell you that. So anyway, just a quick update on those 2 items. Okay, a little bit of potentially boring stuff. Boring but necessary stuff. Fuel rails. And here's what I was mentioning I want to do is I want to have a T-fitting here. And I'll run a line from this fitting. It'll be a mirror image of this. So I just need a little short line, straight fitting here, running right over to this one. And it'll just kind of sit like this. The water exit from the motor is down under here, so I got to keep this up a little bit higher. So I'm going to go ahead and whip this line up real quick. Very exciting for everybody to watch, I know, but necessary. So that hose line built. This comes around here. This goes on here. But that is about where I want it, like that. So there's that. Now, don't worry about this thing. This is permanently mounted here, and the part of this that moves is on the other end. Under here is the linkage from this vacuum actuator to the valves in the intake tracks that open at a particular RPM and pedal position for the variable intake length. So that's where that's going to go. So now I've got this line done, and like I said, this is now going to have a 90 on it that runs to the high pressure out of the regulator. So one less line to do. All right, and with that line set up, I just set the manifold back in place, and yeah, it's hard to film this because obviously bad lighting and not a lot of access, but there's that line set up, right? So it's the supply line coming, this is the supply line from the high pressure, hitting that T and going out to the fuel rails. And unfortunately, I ran out of fittings. I wasn't paying attention. So this line needs to come in here with a straight fitting off the pressure regulator. So I need a straight fitting for that. And then this is the high pressure supply line from the pump, and that needs to be put onto a 90 and then up into the pressure regulator here. So I'm a little bit on hold for that. So I'll get those fittings ordered and wrap up this this whole fuel system thing. And then I think I just have to bite the bullet and sit down at the computer and work out everything about the ECU, which wire is going to go to which sensor, all that other stuff, which is probably going to take a little bit, and I don't think it's going to be very exciting to watch. I'll film some, and if it looks like it might be something you might be interested in, maybe I'll put it at the end of another episode. So for those of you that want to watch, you can see it, but you don't have to. So I'm going to call this for this episode. Oh, do stick around if you want. Check out this Turbo 50 stuff at the end of this episode. If you're a Porsche guy at all, you probably will want to see some of this stuff. And like I said, check out 000magazine.com and look at all their social media stuff. It was pretty cool. But again, calling it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff. And we'll talk to you all again real soon. Everybody take care now. Bye-bye. I ended up spending most of the week, well, part of the week, preparing for a super cool event put on by 000 Magazine. You've heard me talk about them a little bit in the past. This was Turbo 50, which was the celebration of the 50th anniversary of the boosted 911. And it was at an epic location at Summit Skywalker Ranch here in Marin County. Yes, that Skywalker Ranch. It's a place that is essentially impossible to get into. And it's a beautiful location. So I'm just gonna put up a few pictures that I took. I won't go into too much detail. If you're interested in more, take a look at 000magazine.com and look at all the social media stuff that's going on there. Larry Chen was there taking pictures. If you've seen any of Larry Chen's work, it's beautiful, fabulous. So be sure and check that stuff out. But just a couple of quick highlights. The location was fabulous, as you can see here. Here's Yoda. This was an evening shot. This went on from, it was a 4 o'clock to like 10 o'clock event with a couple of major highlights. One being the location, as I keep saying. And here's Yoda and the 000 logo being illuminated on the ground there. But earlier in the day, a couple of the highlights for me, there's an area called the Circle, which is kind of a main circular drive area in the front of the facility. And 000 Magazine had one of every generation and half generation of 911 Turbo, including this cool one-of-one prototype show car. This is a 72, it's actually a 72 tub that served as the prototype for 3 different things. One, it was the prototype for the G-body. And so this is the first G-body car. It's not a real G-body, obviously it's a 72, but first prototype for the G-body. And look at that front bumper. It's a prototype for the RSR as well. And then also a prototype for the Turbo. And what's really interesting, I talked to the guy who did the restoration of this car, single-handedly restored this car. He worked at Porsche for like a decade and a half in every department. And he did all of the mechanical, body, and paint on this thing. It's just stunning. And what's really interesting, most interesting to me, is it's asymmetrical. Each side of the car is slightly different because they weren't sure exactly which style, the subtle differences in a couple of different things. And so this car was really interesting to look at. And again, one of one, flown in from Austria. It was at Luft, it was at a couple of other events, and it was brought to Turbo 50 here. So a very special car and an interesting opportunity. And then again, one of every generation of Turbo 911, including one of the 000 commission Turbo S's, which is the car you can order from Porsche, which is a celebration of 000 Magazine's support effort to take a production car up Pikes Peak. First one on street, first production car on street tires to go up Pikes Peak in under 10 minutes in the hands of David Donner. So a really, really cool set of cars. And Pete Stout, the founder and editor, did a car walk, they called it, where he discussed and just gave a quick overview of every model and sort of the evolution from the very beginning of the Turbo all the way through the latest iteration. And that was really fascinating to hear some of the differences between the cars and how things got changed and all that good stuff. And then there were some sort of famous cars here. There was a couple of 959s that Bruce Canepa had brought, one of them being the prototype car. And I don't know 959s at all, but this was a proof of concept, I guess, in some ways, but a prototype, not production car. And then, of course, a production car. And there was a Singer Turbo study that was spectacular. There was the Roof Yellowbird was there. There were, it just went on and on. including my favorites, which was, I called it the Danny Ungaius collection. And those of you that are Porsche fans probably recognize the Danny Ungaius 934.5 there with the regular headlights, and the 935 there with the slant nose, as well as what was described as Danny Ungaius' personal car brought in by Vasek Polak back in the day, one of the very early Euro spec cars that got brought into the country, and that was Danny's personal car. So that 935 was a poster car for me growing up, and seeing it in real life was very, very special. So again, just a couple of the highlights for me. I hope you're enjoying this part of it. But as I mentioned, go to triplezeromagazine.com and check it out if you're interested in this sort of a thing. And if you ever have a chance to attend a 000 event, I highly recommend it. I mean, it is no holds barred, super high quality cars, really great people. And in the case of this event, the food and drink and location were second to none. It was just epic. So anyway, thanks for indulging me on that. And now let's get back to the build.